Thank you, one, for making the time and space for this because I got really excited every time I see your comments on my posts. I get like a little bit giddy. So it's kind of like this teenager that's like getting validated. That's exactly what it is. It's a validation piece.
Okay. Nice.
Um, so these, just to recap, authentic conscious conversations are for us to have a chat between you and I as if there was nobody watching and just flowing with wherever that goes. Specifically, welcome, Jamie Wilt.
Thank you.
I am excited to have this conversation. And yeah, before I pressed record, we started talking about posture because you were standing up, and I was like, would you like to sit down? Would you like to sit down? And you're rearranging things, and it sparked this piece of, does posture affect the way or standing or physical position, does it affect the way we communicate? And I started saying that when we walk and talk, conversation is stimulating. And your response around sitting with posture, like, what can you express what it was so that we can now go into this follow through?
Yeah, we just spoke about how when sitting up straight, it allows better serotonin through your system, and then obviously that can create, I guess, better mood regulation, and therefore, I guess, yeah, in terms of what you were saying, it definitely can help with confidence and discussion and kind of opening up. And I'd be interested to see from your perspective if that actually helps with opening up chakras and things like that.
Yeah, so
Does posture change the way energy is flowing?
yeah, which was the really interesting piece as you were saying that around the serotonin and the mood. And to give some context, you're a psychologist, so you work in mental health, and
Yeah.
I'm sure have a lot of more professional in the industry opinions. And so I'm quite a conflicting energy or personality. um, and so as you spoke about the serotonin, that's what I visually received was this: if your serotonin's releasing and it's moving through and you've got this confidence and your posture comes up, it made me like visually see the energy in my body start to flow more and clearing up that central channel, which is something that I talk about a lot, is that if the central channel isn't open, and a lot of us, like so many of us, hold it closed here. There's like
Yeah.
a lot of blocks in the heart and then in the solar and the sacral. So the whole trunk of the body is like there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it was like this real confirmation of the linking. And I love linking science and mental health and psychology and the way the mind works and the body works into the energetics, so that there's a big part for me, Jamie, is when I started doing, I guess, life coaching. I wanted to make sure, because I was working with men, and I know that men like to think with their mind and they're very logical. And so I really wanted to make sure everything that I said, I could give enough science to back up what I was doing.
Yeah.
Um, and so the process of understanding this at a deeper level through time has been really interesting. Um, what what was it that got you interested in following? Like, what is your interest in my stuff and what I do, and how does that correlate to what you do?
I can't even remember how the path crossed, but I guess I've always been interested in how energy works, and pretty much like yourself, you try to link the two together. Obviously, for me, there's some validation in some of the stuff I feel like I know, and then obviously a lot of validation in energy as well. So I really do think there's something in combining all the knowledge and putting it all together and piecing it all together. And so I guess what's led me, I guess, to be interested in your stuff is that I guess that resonates with you when you're talking, when you're with your posts, and you're really, yeah. And I feel like you do give good advice to people, valid advice, and helping people out. And I'm drawn to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's not just going bloody blah,
Yeah, I have noticed that some of the things that you have really interacted with is where there's maybe some tools that have been involved in a post or like reflection pieces. And so
Yeah.
I have a personal, I wouldn't say belief, an experience, right? So a part of my experience was that when I was going through suffering, I guess, and a level of what I would say was undiagnosed depression, and a point of being so disassociated from my body. I was completely numb. So I didn't feel happiness. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness. I was just empty vessel. And during that period, I knew that, like, logically, I knew that it wasn't right and I needed to do something about it. But I didn't know what to do. So I went to see a psychologist, and I went to see a counselor through the Women's Centre. And one of the times that I went to the Women's Centre was, it actually just destroyed my hope in mainstream mental health, like completely destroyed it, where I was like,
Yeah.
just like so much. I was sitting in this consult with her, and I was saying, look, this has happened to me. This has happened to me. I behave this way in relationships. I do X, Y, and Z. And with that, I need to, I sort of just finished with this whole explanation of my life and my trauma and my relationship stuff. And she's like, it sounds like you have a lot of awareness on what's wrong with you. So when you have something new pop up and we need to look at some new triggers, then I think you should come back. And I was like, yeah, I literally didn't get any tools. I didn't know to ask. So at that time either. Like, I didn't know what I was even asking for. Maybe it was because I went in there and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I don't know why I'm here. And then, bleh. And yeah, maybe I wasn't able to express in how much it was affecting me. Maybe I held it together so much in my masculine. I was quite, like, I could always speak from my trauma, and I could
Yeah.
always speak it out loud, that people would say I was vulnerable, but I wasn't, because I never spoke to the feeling that was completely disconnected from it.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear, like, from your professional point of view around some of that.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was once, and we'll get to that, and I'll get to that. I had an experience where I was just overloaded with work and etc., and having some private issues, and I went to see a counsellor around the corner, and I said to her, all I want to do is just tell you everything, okay? You don't need to say anything. I just feel like unloading is going to be really helpful for me. And within 10 minutes, she's offering this and she's offering and she cut me off, and I was like, this just is not working. One of the things that came through when you were saying that was, it's not so much people's training. Sometimes it's not so much what they know. It's more like just, I guess, them. Some people are going to be good at that type of thing and other people may not be. I guess sometimes it is maybe a roll of the dice. Or is it that we get, put in front of these people to learn something about ourselves? So sometimes there's a bit of all the above, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because in reflection, looking back, and I feel as though had I have not have journeyed the way I did and felt
Yeah.
so alone and felt so isolated and had to find other ways, I wouldn't be with the knowledge that I have today.
Yeah.
And that has been a lot of my path, was being, I guess, oh, I don't like to use the word rejected. Oh, definitely a sting there. But there's been a level of rejection of help when I have asked in different
Yeah.
ways, that I've been like, well, I can just fucking do it on my own anyway. Like that real protective masculine part of me that kept me alive, has been the discipline to keep moving forward and keep, like, not just give up. Like I've never ever been one to give up. And
Yeah.
even at the effect of my physical body and my mental health.
It was interesting that
um,
you said, sorry to interrupt.
no, go. I'm really interested.
Interesting how just before you were talking about, they said vulnerable, and I'm kind of I'm the type that says, well, if you are opening up like that, that is a position of strength rather than a position of weakness or vulnerability.
Yeah, I
That,
feel
that's
like,
what I got out of what you said. I was like, well, that's actually a position of strength. It's not a position of vulnerability. So if you're opening up about trauma, you're actually developing strength.
I agree completely. And um, they're completely different. And I'd be curious to see your perspective on this as well. Is that what I've come to identify, even with myself now, is I've got of different energies in my body, and then different new energies or different emotions. And what my mind's wanting to do is compartmentalize or categorize it with something from the
Yeah.
past. And having to be really aware in my body and myself to go, oh, is this anxiety or fear, or what? Like, oh, what is this? And
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, this is just an intensity of expansion, joy, or excitement. Like the amount of excitement for what's to come, and my brain going, this isn't safe, like, and wanting to
Yeah.
shut it down. And I guess the topic was mind control. So to me, that's my mind trying to control my experience. Is this like, have you experienced a lot of this within yourself?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, I can talk about it from a psychology perspective, because this is the type of thing I believe has validity to it. Is if we look at ourselves as babies, so when we first growing up, we're taking all the information. So from about 0 to 6, we're like sponges. We're almost like a hypnotic kind of trance, where any information we're picking up really easy. So whatever happens in them first 6 years is fairly solid, and so that will continue on unless you kind of actually change those mindsets. So the more we grow up, the more things reinforce that belief. That becomes our ideas and our thoughts and our belief system, I suppose.
Mhm.
So moving forward onto that, we tend to, the body will kind of go into a protective mode. If it's unsafe to have a new thought and a new belief, it will try to protect itself. And so that can generate a bit of an uncomfortable feeling. And so I think sometimes that's what happens with people. There's new information and even a new feeling they haven't experienced before will trigger off and then our brains will try to figure it out based on what we've learned throughout our life. So the brain's trying to process it. What is this? What is this? What is this? It's close to that. That could be it. It's close to this or close to that. So it tries to figure out what's happening and tries to give it a label.
Yeah, and that's something that I've found through my own awareness and watching people and observing and understanding consciousness is the mind always just wants to understand. And so when there's a new experience or when there's something that's looping in my mind,
Yeah.
and because I don't often have mind chatter anymore. I'm very quite centered, grounded, peaceful, pretty zen. But when I am looping on something, I'm like, my mind's trying to make sense of this new experience or this awareness or this information, and it's seeking the awareness. And that's what I found for myself is if I'm like repetitively on something, it's because a part of me is looking for the puzzle pieces to either see part of myself and go into deeper healing or to understand a situation. And then when I find it, it just like dissolves. Is
That's a great explanation.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, is when the mind does that, and it's like, repetitively looping over a trauma, say, well, it is a trauma. It's always a trauma or and discomfort in the mind that it's trying to make sense of. From the understanding of I guess healing trauma and looking at trauma, how does that make sense in a mental like health perspective? Like, what is it about self-realization or self-reflection that helps to heal trauma from a mind, from understanding the mind?
I guess a lot of it has to do with being aware and being able to catch what's going on. So you described it, what I would consider perfectly described. So you're able to catch what your brain's doing essentially. So you know that, yeah, it's doing this. So then you're able to easily get through that. I think that's one of the problems people have is they're not, they're just catching 20% of the brain activity. So a lot of the stuff I do with people is really expanding on that and being able to observe and know what, almost pretty much word for word, what your brain is doing and what images it's having and where it's going, because that then triggers off certain emotions, which then obviously has some energy attached to that, and then that can perfectly describe your experience sometimes, and especially with trauma. That thing over there reminds me of this, which then reminds me of that, which then reminds me of that, which is the trauma. And it can be that complicated sometimes, or it can be that simple sometimes.
Yeah. And I know that people find even just being aware of their thoughts really challenging. And it made
Yeah.
me that I was going back into when I was mindset coaching, and that was one of the things was start to be more aware of the stories you tell yourself. And the example I would give was when you wake up, what's the thought that goes into your mind? And it's usually, I'm tired. Fuck, the alarm's gone off. I don't want to go to work. Like all of this, usually quite a low negative for majority of
Yeah.
humanity is like, there's not a yay, another new day. What can we go explore? I mean, even now this morning for me, I was like, oh, my body's still tired. I don't want to get up. And I heard that like story straight away, and I was, what's actually really true for me to do? Okay, get up and go and breathe. And, just getting up and getting out. But I know just becoming aware of those thought forms and the communication that we have and the negative programming, because it would be, from that, it's then you've already programmed energetically, right? Those thoughts have a vibration, and that sets your mood, right? So, and I don't actually, this is something I don't know very much about, is the chemistry side of how thoughts create say dopamine or serotonin, and like I understand it very, very brief, like vague. But I know it from the energetic side that a thought creates an emotion creates an energetic vibrational frequency. And I know that that has an effect on the physiology of the body as well. And I would love to hear
So what
what
is it
you
that
know
you
about
don't what is it that you don't think you know about that, because you just described it?
that. Oh, maybe what is the what is actually happening with the chemical balance? Okay, this is terminology I haven't heard for a while. The chemical balance of the brain, right? And when you have a chemical imbalance, there is that's when you're more susceptible to mental health conditions, correct?
In the medical terms, yeah.
Okay. So if there's programming from zero, I thought it was 0 to 7, so that was new for me. I thought
Yeah,
it
the
was,
7 year, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, 06, 07, yeah.
Okay. Our identity is created in and our traumas and our whole everything is ran off 0 to 7. So we and well most of humanity are still at a 7 year old's consciousness if they haven't done the work. And so coming to an understanding that those belief systems are the core reasons for what's happening in their reality, that's where those beliefs come in, right? So there's the frequency and the vibration. But what, what, okay, I'm giving you my energetic perspective because it's way easier to communicate. From the understanding of energy and the energy body and the mind, body, and soul components and how they all communicate together. If we
Yeah,
don't at 0 to 7, that frequency then affects the body and the density in the body because the energy, if you imagine we're all frequency and vibration, molecules are vibrating at a specific frequency,
yeah,
and then we have a trauma, that energy isn't like stagnated. It doesn't like work as it's gone funky. And so you have
yeah,
funky bits of energy through your body. And eventually that gets more funky, more heavy, and more dense until it manifests into a physical representation of
yeah.
disease or mental health, or and this is my opinion, um, a physical manifestation of what was going on in a belief system.
Yeah.
So from
I
the
can't disagree there. That's how I see it as well. There may be more different terms used, but essentially it's the same concept.
yeah.
So
So
when
when
yeah, when energy does get stored, it can manifest in physical issues, and then a chemical issue as well. So if your body's not generating enough serotonin, or it's generating too much serotonin, or you got too much dopamine happening, that all has an effect.
and when these imbalances happen and people say someone comes to you and they are seeking your help because of anxiety,
Yeah.
and they've got some level of anxiety that's manifested into their experience. How do you start to help that nervous system to calm? Like, what is the is, what is serotonin and dopamine when it comes to the chemical balance? When it comes to something like anxiety.
I'm trying to think I've had a memory block for a moment. It generates a different chemical, anxiety.
Yeah.
And so it's the fight flight kind of response, all that stuff you would know. So that generates a chemical, and then the other chemicals aren't really flowing as well. So you've got to, for that period of time, that you're anxious, you're generating a certain chemical.
Yeah.
Which is kind of helping you defend yourself. So in real human terms, it's actually good, but over a longer period of time, it can make you very tired. So imagine being on edge for an extended period of time. Your body's going to, that's why you can sit still for 10 hours and then feel like you haven't slept. If you're, sometimes I used to do security work, and sometimes, nothing would happen, but the idea something might happen, it would be a perfectly good night, nothing would happen, but the thought that something was going to happen and being on edge for an extended period of time, I'd be so drained afterwards. And I'm like, nothing even happened yet. I'm so exhausted. It was the energy levels just being used to keep me alert for that period of time. And it just stays there. And then the shift's over. And then, I need to go to bed now. Didn't even do anything, just kind of stood and walked around and nothing was going wrong, but I thought something was, so then I was tired.
That's an interesting part about how ingrained our fight, flight, freeze responses are, and how even when we know, like logically, even when we know we're safe, even when we know there's nothing there, if there is enough of a PTSD response or a trauma response that's locked into the body, that as soon as there's there doesn't even, what I have noticed, does there have to be a reason to be on alert?
Not always.
Okay, cool.
But the brain, this is where it comes back to the brain having certain belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how I explain it to people. Imagine you're a caveman back in the day. You go outside, see a saber-toothed tiger, your body goes, runs back inside. The guy next door, or the lady next door, she goes outside, sees a saber-toothed tiger, cute little pussy cat, goes up, it gets eaten and is dead. So from that, one species dies, the other one stays alive because of anxiety. And so it's inbuilt in us to have a defense mechanism for being safe, which is why most people go to more of a negative thought first. It's not really that they're a negative person, it's that we all kind of go to the safety mind first.
And that's the reptilian brain?
Essentially.
Because, I mean, my awareness has around it started when basically I ended up with adrenal fatigue, and I started having intense muscle aches and pains, and was going in and out of doctors, and super fit, healthy, thin, lean, at the time, a woman that could not walk up the stairs without having tachycardia, and there was so much in my physical that the only thing that tested up was my cortisol levels were actually dropping. So I can't even remember
cortisol. That's the one.
Yeah. Oh, cortisol. Yeah, of course.
When we have anxiety,
actually know that. So the cortisol, instead of being what most people have, where it's in excess because of fight, flight, freeze, I'd been in this fight, flight, freeze response for so long that it was just not working anymore at all, and it was depleting. And it was through that I also had the awareness from, I guess, a higher knowing, my higher self, or it was just like a message of, if you don't change your external environment, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
I was kind of overwhelmed by that, but it showed me the intensity of what happens to the body when you are in fight, flight, freeze, and defense. And so it's been like a continual process since then to calm the nervous system. And although I'm aware of my flight, freeze, blah, 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 blah. I'm aware of my fight, flight, freeze, and fawn,
Yeah.
where I go into a flight sort of response or a fix fawn kind of. But I wasn't aware of how much I was living in that nonstop all the time. Um,
Yeah.
what I have noticed now is that I don't live in that state. So when I do feel it, it's like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like what's happened? Why am I protecting myself? And right before this call, I had terror come up, and I was like, and I was going to actually be like, can you facilitate me? Because I don't know what's going on. And then I was like, oh, you know how to soothe yourself. You do, you know exactly what to do. And instead of contracting and freaking out, because if I hadn't have caught it in that moment, it was one of those moments that I felt like I could have almost had an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
And so I really just like opened my chest, lifted my posture, breathed in slow, and really focused on my breath, and allowed my heart to sort of open up and come forward. And it's okay, you're safe. And the self-soothing and the talking, and it's just energy, it's just emotion, da 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 da
Yeah.
da. And I don't have to do that often anymore. But when I do, it's definitely more intense, and I can feel the physical response so intensely.
High five on your response to it, by the way.
Thank you.
Good job. That's it. Yeah.
It is, well, how would you, when somebody goes into a trigger, like I've shared what I did, what would you say for someone who, say, maybe has an intense trigger? How can they, like, what do you suggest people do in those moments?
I guess it's a combination of being aware of it. So that's the first part is teaching people to know what to look for. Once they get that, that's pretty much most of the issue taken care of, because then you can apply whatever strategy you wish to that works for them. Some people might be breathing, some people might be going for a run, some people might, whatever they need to do with that energy at that time, that's going to work for them. The main thing is being able to catch it out without, steering totally away from everything you're trying to do. Because like you said, it is just energy that's there all of a sudden, and it's just what do you do with that energy, and being able to at least identify it in some form. So you can call it whatever you want, really. It's just a label. Anxiety is just a label. It's just it's the same energy as excitement, really. So you could pretty much, we just give labels to pretty much everything. But it can be helpful in that situation where you're looking for a word that can at least describe the experience that will help you get to the next bit where you have to manage it.
Yeah.
So if it is one word, and if the word's anxiety, that's okay. Just experience anxiety right now. You know what you got to do. You pretty much did what I would hope most of the people can get to when they're experiencing an intense emotion, to where they can actually talk themselves through that, do some kind of actions, and then it processes out, and then it kind of just heads away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I love what you said about that around anxiety is excitement. And when I started to understand I guess where this loops back is the brain trying to make sense or communicate. And feel like our language is really only, like, these labels are just there to communicate an experience, either to yourself or
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the story that was told that made me see this around how many energies are similar, and it's just our perspective of the emotion or the angle that our brain has seen it from. And
Yeah.
it was this little it was a mentor of mine, and he told a story about being like 5 or 6, super young, and he was at a theme park, and he was like, "Daddy, I want to go on the roller coaster." And um, his dad was like, "Yeah, okay." And in the line, he could feel his son's energy, and he's like, "Oh, you must be really scared. It's a really big roller coaster." Now, so at that moment, that projection that was put on him was, "Oh, okay, this feeling's being scared. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
fearful," right?
Yeah.
And it was years and years of work that it wasn't fear, it was excitement. He was excited, but he had this um, someone else that was not inside of his body tell him what he was experiencing. And
Yeah.
I feel like that is like key to understanding. Well, one, let's try and avoid as much trauma in our children between 0 to 7 as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
With how we speak and ask a question of being curious. You know, if we had more curiosity to go, okay, this, if I say this, this is going to automatically make the mind go, this is what this is. I found
Yeah.
my, identification
Yeah.
label,
Yeah.
keeps me safe and comfortable. Um, but have the questioning, and it's in this relating piece as well, asking what is it you're experiencing in your body right now. What does it
Yeah.
feel like? Is it hot? Is it cold? Like, where is it? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I imagine that's how you start to get people to also identify with their awareness.
Yeah. Well, I guess anxiety and excitement is a difficult one because sometimes it can loop over and you don't know. And it could be one and the same, or it could be you're experiencing a bit of both.
Mm.
Obviously, there's a people view excitement as happy, view anxiety as not happy. I think that can blur the lines of that description as well. Are we feeling excitement when we actually feeling anxious, or are we feeling anxious when we're feeling excitement? Are we labeling it it's the totally wrong way all this time?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's important for everyone to be open to that kind of concept about all of it, especially when we are talking about emotions. It can be very misread and misunderstood. So, like you said, it's important to teach people to, get a feel of what it is. Because you're
Yeah.
right. How do you tell a 6-year-old who has never experienced it before? If are you excited? I don't even know. What even
Yeah.
is excitement?
What's excitement?
Am I am I am I scared? I don't even know what that is either. What is that? So you're right. We can project, even if it's an innocent. Oh, are you scared? In a fun kind of way. That, like you said, that projected a lot and didn't wasn't even aware.
And I think the key is awareness, right? It's
Yeah,
in
yeah,
all of it. It's like mental health from even like the more professional mainstream way, I believe, is the cure to it is awareness. That's what I personally believe.
yeah,
And um, that just having an awareness of what we're saying and how it can be received, and what we're saying to
yeah.
ourselves and what is experienced. Um, I don't actually know where in my journey I started to be aware of my thoughts. Wasn't There's no like pivotal moment that I
Yeah,
remember being it felt as though maybe it was like small little things started happening. I know after okay, so this is beautiful piece. After I decided to leave my marriage and start to work on healing with the less energy and conflict and communication and discord that was in my experience, there was space. So I had more energetic space. And what I found was in the removing of the trauma response, the triggers that I was constantly living in, by putting myself in a space where there was less external triggers, things just started to shift in my mind. And so, I mean, mine was environmental, by, every single time space in my life. So even if that's going for a hike or going to the beach for a swim or going for a walk or fitness, anytime that I would do something that there was sort of space, some form of awareness would come through for me. How do you tell someone, because it feels so foreign to me now, because I work with people that are so aware. So
yeah.
it's like going back into something that like a past life, and picking back information that I learned then, which is still really important and relevant, because we're all so different in our stages of our journey. What is it that you would tell someone? How do you tell someone to become aware of awareness when they don't even know what awareness is? Like, how do you get someone to be aware of their thoughts, or how do you start to open that space for that to occur?
It is very, I guess it's one little tiny step at a time, would be the only way I could describe that. Giving them because once they identify one thing, they can identify another thing, and then, they slowly get used to catching a thought, catching a feeling. They can label that if they like. And then that, I guess it just builds and builds over time. It really is just helping them understand what it is, I guess. It's almost like speaking to a 0 to 7-year-old.
Yeah.
They almost like reteaching them about what is actually happening. And sometimes I'll even use that analogy where from 0 to 6 or 7, we are in that kind of hypnotic state. So all the beliefs that you've come to up to now, they're all sometimes very hard to shift because they're just there and they're automatically playing over and over all the time. And so it's learning to catch that out. I mean, yeah, it really is one little tiny step at a time. Just right at the start, I often tell people, just, the most important thing is just observation of yourself. So there's no point going through any therapy until you're able to catch out, because essentially the therapy is, you can just trial a whole number of things, but if you're not catching out what's happening, and what I say to people is repetition of that, repetition of observation, repetition of trying the thing that you're going to be using. And that's where it does relate to, when we were younger, we had things repeated to us. That's what forms our beliefs. And it's no different in adulthood. It's just there's conflicting information. So the more we learn, the more conflicting information we're probably going to have, and the more brain activity we're going to have. So sometimes I don't think it's not that we lose our memories, it's that there's more stuff going in each year we're alive. And so it does compartmentalize a little bit. It's almost like you got to get access to some of those past memories in order to access, that time period to then have certain memories. Oh yeah, that may take a few minutes to even, and you got to get into that space and into those feelings that happened back then in order to remember something. It's not that we got bad memory. It's that just sometimes if you're someone who thinks a lot and is taking in a lot of information and knows a lot of, I'm 45. I've got 45 years of information in this little brain there. So to remember something when I was 8, really got to think of one specific thing when I'm 8, and then that may trigger a few other memories, and that might trigger, and then for some people, their just mind is just flowing and they can just remember a lot of things. But sometimes that requires a trigger of, maybe not a bad trigger, just a trigger of something that happened back then, or a memory, or even a smell or a word or something that when I smell grass, it reminds me of where I used to live when I was a kid. When someone freshly mows a lawn and it's that smell, I automatically think of when I was a child, and it's just my brain always does it, I've noticed. And then I'm able to access memories from that time period really easy. So I remember where I used to live, and then suddenly all these memories are just popping up, and my brain is all from that one freshly mowed grass that's completely different suburb, sometimes a different country.
Yeah, right. And that's beautiful because I work a lot with putting people into a space where they're using their brain in a different way, an altered state of consciousness where it's like going back into, even like it might be a color or an emotion or a picture, or something, whatever it is that takes you back. And then once you have that awareness, it allows for the neuro pathways to start firing and wiring in different ways. And so, I mean, when I was doing mindset coaching, the first thing I would always say, and it's a great reminder for me, is to become aware, like through observation, just to observe yourself. You don't have to do anything else. Just observe when something happens, what you do, what you feel in your body, what someone else's experience is, like what unfolded. And it just shows how much of the time we're doing things completely unconscious and not even connected to our experience. And that's where the autopilot would happen. And I know like disassociation was the thing that helped me to survive through life. And when I start to disassociate now, I'm like, like it still happens. It's still a part of my programming that I haven't completely released. But I see it happen when there's I will say energetic overwhelm. So it's like I've hit a capacity of either holding space, or I'm tired, or there's something, and there's a lot of energy, either sensory, computer, people, noise, because I'm super duper sensory. So often people are like, don't overthink it. That was a thing, and it would piss me off so much. That was a trigger. It was like, don't try to think things. Like, and I would get so annoyed at that projection, because I did not have control of my sensory awareness. I mean, I can manage my sensory awareness now, but I can't control it. The only way I control my sensory awareness is if I check out of my body. That's the control point. So I can be aware of when something is maybe overstimulating or creating story and narrative, and I can be aware of that and then, try and ground myself. But it doesn't mean that all of that's still there. I'm just experiencing it differently. So it's and I feel when it comes to something I've noticed from a more multidimensional level is that people with, say, ADHD or these specific attention pieces is, from my opinion, from a more spiritual perspective, I feel like it's a mixture of trauma with someone who's very sensory. And the trauma gets in the way of receiving the sensory information. which then creates the behavioral patterns and the distraction and the level of awareness that people say with ADHD have, and their mind capacity is actually like incredible. Like
Yeah.
in my opinion, the people that I know that I see this with, I'm like, you are like an amazing human being. We just need to
Yeah.
work on a few tweaks. Like, and do you, I know this is challenging in that way of, um, what do you feel about that? How trauma can be perceived and create communication and experiencing issues that if it
Oh,
wasn't if it wasn't there, there would be more awareness of gifts or mind ability.
sorry, this door opened. Can you just repeat that last bit again?
Can I rewind?
Yeah.
With if we supported children, right? So if we supported children in their natural innate personalities and there was less, I guess, conditioning for kids to be a certain way. And hypothetically, if we lived in a perfect world and trauma didn't exist, do you feel that we would have these different conditions like attention deficit disorder?
Yeah, definitely, maybe. Yeah. A
Maybe.
definite maybe. I'm not sure that's a term, but it is now. It's a definite maybe.
Yeah, because I really thought about if we nurtured people for their individuality, if we nurtured people for the things that they have as strengths, right? So, say somebody who is labeled ADHD, they're busy, they're very in tune, they like to like be creating lots of different things at once,
Yeah, yeah,
and if that was okay, right, and if we allowed that to be nurtured in a way and to maybe bring in more focus or attention in the body.
yeah.
I don't feel that. So I feel that me and my brother had ADHD, and I still have a tendency to do that. But what I've noticed with myself is what I feel is where there's the trauma response looped in to being very hyperactive, very sensory, very connected,
Yeah.
wanting to create and not and someone who gets bored really easy. Right. So when I started to work on my trauma and being able to sit with myself, I still had all of those things, but they weren't displayed in the same way. So I
Okay.
don't identify to any labels anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I do feel like it's gotten too label orientated and almost a negative kind of spin on that.
Mm.
So I'm not, this is going live, isn't it? I'm not big on psychiatry in that way.
Yeah.
And even psychologists have a tendency to try to assess and label where actually, you need to be looking at the individual every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to look at the individual because it's their experience and even their body and their energy and their individual thing going. Even though we're all connected, it is they're having an experience and their brain is telling them things from the information that they're receiving. And even this, a school system itself can be the issue for people that are got extra energy and got extra, like you said, exactly how you described it. You put them in a situation where they've got to sit still and focus on one particular thing. that they might have trouble with that, even though that may be an actual gift that they have. They're not able to express that gift because someone else is trying to get them to do a certain thing. So they're not able to express in the way that they're naturally drawn to express.
Yeah, and I believe that in itself can create trauma.
Yeah. Because
Um,
imagine they're like you said, a sensory experience happening while there's everyone socially around as well. So that could be triggering that they're having that experience in front of everyone, which could be then reinforcing that. And then there's the brain telling them what that means based on anything that the only information that they have so far in their lives. And then their parents take them to a doctor who says, you have a problem. Here's what the label is for you. It all kind of continues to reinforce itself when actually, like you said, if it's given a certain direction right from the start, imagine someone telling their kid, oh, you're very creative there and very energetic, giving,
some form of positive reinforcement.
Yeah, and even explaining that to a teacher, well, here's how you can best work with this child and telling the child certain things as well. So it does come from, I guess, everyone expanding on what they know on a bigger level helps us interact better and help us see things that way.
Yeah, exactly that.
I guess that's where people like you and I are trying to help the world out in that way.
Yeah, not coming to conclusions or limitations of what we know and expand on being open-minded to seeing different perspectives, different angles, different knowings. And yeah, I feel like that is the key to like having an awareness and shifting our consciousness. To close, because I'm like aware of time and energy and all the things, I just want to ask one question. I don't know whether it's going to be able to be answered, to be honest. But what do you feel is the core wound trauma for people?
Core wound trauma. I guess for each person, that's going to be very different.
Do you feel that there is an overall one when you look at it, or do you feel like it's very individually based?
I guess people can have a number of different, how would you call it, core things that have happened to them that have influenced them. And I do try to get to that. And sometimes that is what leads people to run away from therapy. Once you get to that core issue, it's like, it triggers off a overwhelming emotion. I find that when people get, that they'll put up a defensive wall at that point. Anyway, going back to the question itself, I mean, what it is, it could be a number of different things for different people. But I do think there is a core issue for, I guess, each of us that does dictate, and if it comes to trauma, there is a core to that.
What do you feel like that core thing is?
Like I said, different for different people.
Mm-hmm.
What can I revert the question back to you?
Yeah, you can.
I may not be understanding context, so
yeah,
give me what you're saying.
well, See, I used to think, all right, a core wound from like a mind or a psychology perspective to me was always there was an experience, and in that experience, a wounding was caused in that first
Yeah.
0 to 7. And then as I continued on working on my own awareness and looking at my distortions and my beliefs and my traumas, and I and doing, things like plant medicine and really expanding my awareness and my consciousness out to levels, I guess, beyond the human lens.
Yeah.
I feel as though, and not from like a spiritual or religious perspective, I feel like the core wound for us as beings or is separation. So whether or not that's separation from the true self, separation from creator, separation from God, or whatever terminology you want to express, I feel like if we could say compartmentalize, because I like to do that because I have a lot of masculine mindset, it would be that any core trauma, the root core trauma is a level of separation, because that's when a fight, flight, freeze response sort of is perceived. There's a level of internal separation, even though we're not actually separate, at a very much higher level of communicating. We're talking about a very worldview now. Um, the the not being in some form of your center point. For me, that's mind heart coherence. So anything that pulls me out of mind heart coherence and being present, anything that pulls me out of presence, separation. That's there we go. That's a bit more humany. Um,
Yeah.
would be and so fight, flight, freeze pulls you out of presence, right? So to me, it's like what there's it almost doesn't matter to me what the mind or the story or the experience was. And this is where I've come to now is all of that is relevant. And yes, there are things that we do need to look at to understand and have more awareness. But my truth at this point in time is if we choose presence, and if we continue to choose presence and we continue to choose presence, then the rest of those things just dissolve away and they start to disappear. It's almost like a simultaneous healing of if I choose the present moment, then all the things that pulled me out of the present moment and into a story of pain no longer exist. So that's my answer to what I I feel.
I like it.
Beautiful, thanks. Awesome. I really appreciate your time, Jamie.
Pleasure. Thank you for
Thank
your time.
Thank you for having a chat. And yeah, I look forward to connecting further in the future.
No worries. Great.
Have a beautiful day.
Have a great day. You too. See ya.
Bye.